But I want to welcome everybody to another Temple Beth Torah lunchtime learning. This will be recorded for access later, and a number of people have told me that they were unable to come today, but would like to see the discussion. One of the things that I want to make that I think is important for everybody to know when we get into the discussion of who is the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that there's a difference between a rabbi and a Rebbe. And Rabbi Goldstein will go into more detail about that, but the word rabbi means teacher. Rebbe comes from the same derivative, but what has become known as a Rebbe is someone who is an influence on a larger group of people. There are many different Hasidic sects based on what part of Eastern Europe they came from. The Lubavitch sect is from Lubav in Poland, and the Rebbes from Lubavitch are a little bit more well known amongst the general Jewish population because the Lubavitch have been more interested in outreach. That they have, there's a phrase that Rabbi Goldstein taught me, no Jew left behind, and that the Rebbe that we're speaking about today was the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe. His father-in-law, Rabbi Yitzchak, was it Yitzchak?
Yosef Yitzchak.
You're mute. You're not muted, Rabbi, but I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, so speak again.
Hello.
Dan, I can hear him.
I can't hear you, but I sort of hear you from my wife's room. Oh, everyone else can hear him?
Yeah.
Well, that's strange. You can hear me and you can hear Rabbi Goldstein.
Yes.
I hear
But
him
I can't
as well.
hear Rabbi Goldstein.
We can hear it.
Okay, that's fine. The Rebbe is someone who has a different level of respect. And there were 7 different Lubavitcher Rebbes in the history, but the one who's called the Rebbe is the most recent one, who actually passed away in 1994 and has not been replaced because he had such a strong influence. Rabbi Goldstein, I've known since he came to Houston. He is a native of McAllen, Texas, and has studied in many different locations, and he spent time in different cities, including in South America. And he came to Houston in 1998 to be the associate director of outreach of Chabad Lubavitch in Houston. And in that role, he has really focused on that notion of no Jew left behind. 2 of his most influential aspects have been servicing Jewish inmates in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, where he is the lead chaplain. Yes, sir.
Dan.
Yes.
The power just blew out, but it just went back on. So give me about 2 minutes. The computer has to boot up.
Very good.
And then I'm going to get right on. Just tell everyone I'm so sorry. It is obviously a very powerful thing we're going to say, because
Correct. Absolutely.
I can't believe this as I'm about to start talking.
Yes, and you're on speaker, so they understand what just happened.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
I'm coming.
Very good. Yeah, so you heard the power went off in his office and it just went back on. So as he said, it's very powerful discussion that we're having. So as I was saying, there are a lot of different Rebbes in history from different sects of Hasidic Judaism. The Rebbe is the one who's known as the Rebbe is because of his influence from 1951 when he became the Rebbe, when he succeeded the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, and until 1994 when he passed away. Hasidism, the word Hasid means the pious one. And Chabad is the name of the organization that was founded by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Chabad starts with, it's an acronym, for the Chet stands for Chachma, wisdom. The Bet is Bina, understanding, and the Daled is Da'at, knowledge, I believe. He'll correct me on that. Chabad, what does Chabad stand for? And the Chassids, they're the ones you see with the long beards and the black hats, but they started with the Baal Shem Tov, who is the master of the good name, is what his name means. Baal Shem Tov, master of the good name, Yisrael ben Eliezer, and he was the founder of the Hasidic movement. He was someone who, I tell a lot of stories about him. He was someone who had a great influence. The Hasids brought together the ritual observance with the passion that often the Hasids bring their prayer together without words, with the niganim, the melodies that help bring in the spirit of Judaism, the spirit of connection with God. There are many stories. I'm a big fan of Hasidic folklore. Here comes Rabbi Goldstein again. And as I was saying, that he focused much of his career on ministering to Jewish inmates in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And also another specialty of his has been the Friendship Circle, which is helping youth and adults with either mental disabilities or emotional disturbances. And a lot of what the Friendship Circle has done is training young people to help these people with mental or emotional disabilities. And so it's a very empowering kind of a thing. And more recently, Rabbi Goldstein has fulfilled one of his dreams of opening his own synagogue in West Houston, Chabad West Houston, and it's a wonderful community. And so with that lengthy introduction, I give you my dear friend. He and I go to prisons together. I celebrate some of the holidays with him and his family. He's got a wonderful family. His wife, Elisa, teaches, is a marvelous teacher who has been a recipient of the Irving Samuels Teacher of the Year Award. And he has 5 children, ranging in age from, he'll tell us, but Sima, Avrami, it's girl, boy, Sima, Avrami, Chayela, Zalmi, and Rosie. All right, Rabbi Dovid Goldstein.
Thank you, Rabbi Dan. Hope everybody's having a good day so far. So Dan called me the other week and he had asked me how would I feel about speaking about this subject. And I thought for a few minutes and I said, okay, you know what, we'll definitely do it because it's something that I live it on a day-to-day basis with what I do as being a shaliach, as Dan has told you all, a Chabad rabbi. So what I just want to jump right in, and here I'm going to share my screen with you all. Oh, I can't. Can you go in the settings, Dan, and make it that I can share my screen. So anyways, what I'm going to do today is touch on a few different angles about how the Rebbe influences the concept of inclusion in general. Now, inclusion, of course, we know deals with, the term is used a lot in the communities that deal with children or adults that have special needs. But as well here, the point of inclusion, I'm not speaking about just from the special needs angle, but I'm speaking about from more of a global angle. Because one of the things that influenced me about the Rebbe in general, because I wasn't on at the very beginning to hear Dan's introduction, but I was born in a small town in Texas called McAllen, Texas, and did not have a lot of exposure to many different Jewish things. It's a very small community until later in life when I moved to Dallas when I was 12, and then, was not 12, I was 11. And then I met the Rebbe for the first time because my parents are divorced, and my father moved to Crown Heights. So when I was 12 years old was the first time I met the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And it was a very exciting experience. And in 1989, I made the move of leaving public school in Dallas, Texas, and I went to the Chabad yeshiva in Los Angeles, California. And there was something very much that resonated with me and the Rebbe's message. And this was that many of the leaders, people that were exposed to, had kind of like a vision, or you could call it agenda, which if you fit into that mold, that's what it was, talking to. But in regards to the Rebbe was not just a Jewish leader, but he was a world leader with a worldly vision. So I want to just start off with sharing two different famous interactions of the Rebbe with people, and politicians, to show that the Rebbe's concern is for mankind in general. And yes, the Rebbe is Jewish. Yes, there is a goal for the Jewish people, but there's also a worldwide goal, and it was a very broad vision. So two of those stories, the first I'm going to share with you, let me see if I can share my screen at this point. Nope, still can't.
I have to make you a co-host again.
Okay, go ahead. Here I am. Okay. There we go. Y'all are able to see that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. The first question I want to talk about is Chinatown. Here's a famous story of the Lubavitcher Rebbe and a famous U.S. U.S. senator who had a relationship with the Rebbe, Daniel Patrick Moynihan. So he once had a yechidus, hour conversation with the Rebbe. And towards the end, the Rebbe asked if he could do a favor, or he could ask a favor of the senator. So one thing that you might not know, I don't know, unless you're from New York, so with a lot of the big Jewish leaders, when a politician, or it's not unique to New York, but New York just has a very big population of such. When somebody comes to you to get, to have this sort of a meeting, usually there's an ask. And usually it's an ask for your specific community. What can you do for me? So here the Rebbe says, I have an ask. And of course, this politician is like, oh, here it comes. He's probably going to want money for his yeshivas or for his outreach programs or for the shluchim, because that was very common. And this was a request that he had received many times from many other religious figures. So the Rebbe it continues the conversation. This is the Rebbe's request. There is a growing community in Chinatown. These people are quiet, reserved, hardworking, and law-abiding, the type of citizens most countries would treasure. But because Americans are so outgoing and the Chinese are by nature so reserved, they are often overlooked. Thus, they miss out benefiting from several government programs. I suggest that as a U.S. Senator from New York, you concern yourself with their needs. Okay, that was the Rebbe's quote. That is a very unique thing, because here, as Moynihan continues, he says, the Rebbe has thousands of Hasidim in New York, thousands of Hasidim around the world. And here is a potential request he could ask for more funding from the U.S., from the government, towards whatever it is in his specific court, in the group of Chabad. But instead, the Rebbe wasn't concerned with that. That wasn't what he did with that request. Instead, what was he requesting? What was he concerned about? The Chinese people in Chinatown, and that they're being overlooked. don't think he has ever been there, and I'm certain that most people there don't know who he is, but the Rebbe cares about them. Okay? That's the first story I wanted to share with you. The other story I wanted to share with you is in regards to the WIC program, the Women's, Infants, and Children program. And this was a conversation that took place between Shirley Chisholm and the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I'm going to share my screen, even though I have this. There's actually a video that I want to show. If you just give me one moment, stop the share.
Dr. David Lukens is chair of the Political Science Department at Touro College. For 20 years, he served on the staff of U.S. Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
My two best stories were the Rebbe and public policy, and I used them in class. I used the first one I used in class in American politics as an example. There was a woman in Brooklyn, college teacher, angry black woman named Shirley Chisholm. She got elected to the United States Congress in the mid-60s. She was a fiery speaker. She was considered a black power advocate. Whites were scared silly of her. And she was the first black woman ever elected to the United States Congress, and she was a bomb thrower. So the white Southern racists that ran the U.S. House of Representatives from the South said, we'll teach this blank a lesson. And they assigned her to the Agricultural Committee of the House of Representatives. It was a great gelächter, it was a great joke. I still remember the New York Times front page article said, does a tree grow in Brooklyn, question mark. And they said, you know, the chairman, they've appointed Shirley Chisholm, not to housing, which she requested, not to a committee on poverty, but the Agriculture Committee. And when she retired from the House, I was there when she told the following story. She said she was very depressed, very upset, and didn't know what to do. She got a phone call. The Lubavitcher rabbi wants to see you. Of course, she was the congresswoman from Crown Heights. She had helped win the election, the primary, with the strong support of Lubavitch. She had some very close relationship with people in the Crown Heights community, and she came to see the Rebbe. As he told the story, she had seen him once before when he had refused to endorse her. But then he said, everyone voted for me, so I guess he did something. She was very cute about that. She said, but then she came to see him the second time, and he sat down and he said, I know you're very upset. She says, I am upset. I'm insulted. What should I do? And he said, what a blessing God's given you. This country has so much surplus food, and there's so many hungry people, and you can use this gift that God's given you to feed hungry people. Find a creative way to do it. And she says the first day she came to Washington, she met a young congressman who's now a world-famous figure, Robert Dole from Kansas. And they started talking, and he said, you know, our farmers have all this extra food. We don't know what to do with it. She said, 1 second, the rabbi. And what we call WIC and food stamps, largely expanded. It was a tiny pilot program before the whole existing food stamps program came out of the Agriculture Committee of the United States Congress. And Shirley Chisholm said in front of everyone there in Washington, she said, I owe this because a rabbi who was an optimist taught me optimism, taught me that what God gives, what you may think is a challenge is a gift from God. She said, if poor children, babies, I heard her say this, she said, poor babies have milk, if poor children have food, it's because this rabbi in Crown Heights had vision.
Were you all able to hear that? It came through your speakers. Okay, wonderful. So here is that is the second kind of global story that I wanted to share with you in regards to the Rebbe and the Rebbe's vision for really empowering the whole world to share that vision of we all have to work together to make this world a better place, right? So everybody has their unique job that they can do to advance that. And the Rebbe wasn't just looking for Lubavitch Hasidim to do it, but that every person should use their God-given talents and as well take into account the divine providence of wherever a person is at that specific moment, that's where God puts you there, he places you there, And together with your talents, you would be able to advance some higher level purpose where you are. Usually that's a spiritual thing, or in these cases, it wasn't just about the spiritual, it leads to spirituality, but it was, okay, how, just because on the external level, something might look negative to you, but you have the power and you're placed here because you can transform and make this world a better place. So as a speaker here who's talking about this, I want to just take a moment to engage with you all and ask you, have you ever encountered a difficult moment in your life where there seems to be a lot of challenge and you don't see the blessing in something, but perhaps if you would apply who you are, what your talents are, and you would be able to transform the situation? How many of us have been in such a situation before? You understand my question? So I think we've all been placed in a situation. The question is, have we been able to be successful to turn something around from it and to see something unique, something positive from it, right? So this is something that the Rebbe gave me in my life. Now, do I use that vision all the time? I'm a human being and I'm not perfect. So sometimes I have a bad hair day or a bad beard day. And maybe it's difficult to have what we call the positive bias that the Rebbe had. But if we stop ourselves and really apply ourselves and think and are present in the moment, so to say, then we can really change the way we see things and do things and use our God-given talents to make this world a better place in a positive sense. So that's how I wanted to begin today's talk, talking about those two stories.
Rabbi Goldstein,
Yes.
when you talk about bringing difficult situations like Congresswoman Chisholm's apparent insult at being put on the committee that she least wanted to be on.
Right.
The first thing that came to my mind was, or actually the second thing that came to my mind, was the work you do with incarcerated people at Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And maybe there's a story or two that you could share about people who are in the worst place in the world and they find a way to turn that around.
100%. So what I want to do is like this. So the next two segments I'm going to speak about is the prisons and friendship circle as well. And first thing I want to do is just present the Rebbe's teaching in those regards, and then tie in personal experiences about how I was able to actualize that on a local level, if that's all right with you all. So since Rabbi Dan spoke about prison first, so I'll do that first. So here's it is a talk that is in Yiddish from the Rebbe himself, but there are English subtitles, and I'll probably cut it off after a few minutes when you get the gist, but you get to hear it from the Rebbe directly. So just give me one moment. I'll share the screen.
The vast majority of inmates will eventually return to the community. But that is only one of the reasons it's vitally important how we treat them while incarcerated.
Im Schulchen Norach von Nieden, in der Sedre von Eischen, wo sie seien Alpitera, und sie werden echt ausgerechnet in Alchet, I do allerlei Eischen, von alleine Schkal bejeser, bis alleine Schomur bejeser, wie steht zum Sof von Alchet. Neisaf auf der Eische Moment. Sie aber im ganzen Niedermond der Ihnen von Amitius, aber es soll meinig sein, a Menschen in dem Ihnen, dem Efen von Besasuri. Wo der Tam aufdruf ist verstandig, an einisch von Teira, was Teira wird angerufen, Teiras Chesed, wird er sie angerufen, Teira in alle jüdische Loki. A viele an einische Beteira, in dem Matore in der Ruf a Ihnen shal Chesed. A Duro der Ruf soll sein, der Le Mans Yishmu wie Iro. Nicht nur andere, nur er allein soll nicht tun, a zweite Mal dieselbe Sache. A viele Asami neinisch, was Hepech HaChayim, sagt man sich gleich, a Kivim Shaloko Chichahu. A viele neinisch, was in ganzen Hepech HaChayim, sagt man sich gleich, als Ochur Rato Be'elam Hazeh, Vein Ato Ochur Be'elam Abo. Durch dem Einisch, bekommt Elam Abo, wo das an Schar Nitzchi. Wo der Pfarrer sagt, in Eichin, tut man als eine Eichin, wo sie seine nicht mehr Wattel, dem Zelle Melikim, seine nicht mehr Wattel, dem Ingen, wo darf sein, bei dem Lebeire. Wo sie der Ingen von Bria Orden bis Almeino Kid Museino, sagt auf der Ruf im Posik, Ordon Lomol Ivol, Ani Nivreisi Leshamish Eskeini. Ein Mensch ist beschaffen geworden, nicht auf sein heilig Bottel, nur ist beschaffen geworden auf Ufton. Und nur Ufton in der Nefen, was sie sein, Leshamisches Keni, Ufton in Tev, in Gdusha, in Ruchnis, Vechul. Gedei ein Mensch soll können Ufton, dafür haben Schlitt auf sie. Und das, wie Rashi bringt Europa, wie bald da Vodai Atem, kommen in sein Ewig Lavodi, man kann in sein Ewig aneinander rode. Gedei soll ton dem Loomol Jivoli, die na Nefen mir behatzloche, Leshamish Eskeni, darf haben a Freikeit in ton der Avede. Als sitzt in Beis Asurim, was tut sich auf, man nimmt ihm zu der Möglichkeit, soll etwas tun. Wir können der Anhole von Beis Asurim können machrier sein zu tun, und das nicht sein tun, das allein ist. Okay, du bei Aloha, sag, was mir tut bei eines, wie der Rambam sagt. Kommt nicht Scheiches auf Druf, sagen kann eines, dass nicht sein Piule, nicht sein Avede, nicht sein Meister. Wo der Pfarr kann sein alleinisch von bringen Akkorden, wo das kostet ihm Geld, kann sein alleinisch Momen, Kipschuti, Schneien geschallen, Dalit Vehei, Gasel Mishalem Keren, allerlei Fanim mit der Schule Momen. Es kann sein allerlei Fanim, bei einer Gehe zu später, die, wie gesagt, früher, Makalus, Mardus, Malkus, Vechule, Vechule. Oder sie kann sein, die niedrigste Reifen, der habste Reifen, als wir können mehr nicht geben, die Schlichus Bela Maseh, aber die wie bald am nehmen beim Zumila Meile die Schlichus, ist unter demut ein Nato Ocher Leila Mabo, wo das ist der Eiche, mit welcher Messiah in Alchet. Und wir sollen halten in Leila Maseh, und Teres Chesed soll sagen, es setze mal rein in Beis Asuri. Nehmen wir zu der Möglichkeit von Mekayim sein, oder Lommel Jivoli, dass Hepech Chesed und Onkinti Jeles. Aber Torah, der Zweck von halten am Menschen in Beis Asuri, ist nicht, dass der Linie von Einisch, nur geben ihm eine Gelegenheit, soll sich missbeinen sein. In die Unionen, was getan, bildlich zu ihm. Wo der Pfarrer hat nicht reingesetzt bei Beis Asurim, mit Gitte Mechet Möglichkeit, soll sich lernen, nicht Stallen sein soll, Vechule soll sich können zugereden, zu Ares gehen und nun im Leben Achayim, Beseder, und Bescholim, und Bejesher, durch die Achone, was wird haben, bemerkt von den Tagen, was gefunden hat, in den Beis Asurim. Wo dazu darf man haben zum allen Menschen, soll haben bei sich ein Gefühl, als ist bis an meine Kidmesein. Als ist ein Mensch, was eben nur wird wollen, ist demut Odom, Miloshne, Damelel, in der Welt bis an meine Kidmesein. Bischaß mit Nembem zu, die Möglichkeit, nur mit Richten zu, mit Quetschen zu, und wir lassen nicht aufheben die Kopf, ist nicht nur der Beisa Asur im 4. Tag dem Tachlis, Adrabe, macht von der Mapescheia noch mehr, wie gewähnt, Bischaß, als ins allein gegangen.
Were you all able to read that on the screen?
Yes.
So, to me, those are very, very powerful words of the Rebbe that have formulated ultimately from that talk, there was a group that was started in Florida called the Aleph Institute, and their whole job was to help facilitate rehabilitation through religion for the Jewish offenders. And this started this whole global Chabad network of helping prisoners out. So when I came to Houston back in 1998, one of the first things I did was start visiting prisons. I started with the federal prison, and then I started assisting Rabbi Ted Sanders, Olav Shalom. And when he passed away in 2005, I became the lead rabbi of the Texas prison system. And the thing is, being on the inside, and I know that Rabbi Dan has his stories because we've been going together for many years to visit, you see a very dark reality. If it's a real reality, obviously you're talking to a Chabad rabbi, a chassid that tells you whatever you see is not necessarily the real reality. The real reality is the essence of everything, which is this godly spark that exists in all created matter. And that's what we have to really reach into and reveal, and the other negative stuff will fall away. So that is always a guiding light to me whenever I walk into a prison, which is those who have never gone before. In the state prison units in Texas, at this time of the year, it's very easy to point out that there's no air conditioning in the prisons outside of the chapel and the education and the medical wing and the administrative offices. But the offenders in their living quarters, they live in these concrete cell blocks with no air conditioning at all. Now, remember, as Jewish people, we have this general mission statement that God gave us, which is to make a dwelling place for God within this physical world, which is accomplished through our deeds and revealing the spirituality wherever you are. And that's even in very dark places. So how we deal with offenders is very different. I'll give you one little story that it happened with me in a Huntsville area prison once. I was talking to a chaplain who was at the unit chaplain, happened to be a Southern Baptist minister, and we were discussing this exact concept. And I was shocked at what he told me. What he had said was, Rabbi, if it was up to me, I would place an awl, it's like a javelin, a thing, through the hand of every inmate that's here, and it's going to have to be in their skin the whole time that they're here, and they're going to have to stand on the fields and thrash and work and work because they are terrible people and they deserve punishment. Okay? So I looked at him and I'm like, look, I didn't even know what to say. I mean, I know what to say, but I'm like, gosh, we are on two different opposite ends of how we look at people. Because in my mind, I'm like, everybody is created in God's image, which means that everybody has a soul, which means if we just reach out to the soul with love, perhaps we can release some sort of great thing in this person that can help turn this person around. But if we go in the way that this person is saying, those inmates will never rehabilitate, and then we have the problem that we have all over the United States with prisons, which is a revolving door, otherwise known as recidivism. So therefore, what is it that we do? So we go in there, and our whole point is to help promote rehabilitation, and in our case, through Judaism. We use the Jewish lessons and the Jewish teachings of how to encounter the area where you are, which are very dark areas, but to realize that, so there's this story that's told, whether it's, I haven't been able to confirm it, but I've heard it a couple of times, so therefore I share it. I always share it with the inmates. That basically there was once a prisoner who wrote the Rebbe a letter, and he was very depressed about his predicament. And the Rebbe answered him and said that I'm envious of you. Why am I envious? Because here I am in New York, in the free world, and I'm free to learn Torah and do mitzvot and be a good person and do good things in the world, right? And you are locked away in a very, very dark environment. But by divine providence, God trusts that you will be able to be successful in bringing more light in this dark environment, so therefore he's placed you there. So if anything, look at yourself as God's emissary to help bring light where there's a lot of darkness, and just know that by acting in this way, you will transform or affect the whole world, because when a person brings light into an extremely dark area, the effect is very strongly felt versus bringing light into an area that already has light. So you guys probably want to hear like a few stories. I always tell these two stories in regards to prison. So one story that I speak about is the concept of, it was once an inmate that was from an Orthodox background, and he was sentenced to 8 years in state prison. And while I was at the prison, many times I would have to smuggle kosher food in my pocket for him, because those years there were no kosher food. There wasn't kosher food in the system other than whatever you could buy in the commissary, which is like tortillas and beans and rice and tuna and peanut butter, which is what he lived with for a very long time. So one of the things that he really always looked forward to but was never able to do in jail was to celebrate the holiday of Sukkot in a sukkah, and it was something that really bothered him. He wanted to eat in a sukkah and be in a sukkah. So many years around the same time of the year, in the summertime, he would say, what's going to be with the sukkah this year? And I honestly would try, and I'd work it all the way up the chain to the headquarters in Huntsville. And the outcome was always the same. No, it's not going to work this year. No, it's not going to work this year. One year I decided I'm going to start earlier, and I'm not going to take no for an answer. So I made sure we got to have a meeting with all the real decision makers around the table and discuss this, because it's got to happen. Because it's abusing there's religious rights, because Judaism is one of the oldest religions. It's a valid religion. Everybody recognizes it. And if a Jewish person has an obligation to eat in a sukkah, there must be a way that it could be accommodated. It's just, it's not in your mind. So you need me to come and explain and show how it could be actualized. So I made the trip up there with another gentleman who helped drive me. I remember it was a fast day. I was starving, but I went there and talked about the sukkah. And I was told, okay, we'll let you know. A month goes by, I didn't hear anything from the prison. And I called the head chaplain. I said, where are we up to with this decision in regards to the sukkah? Because now we're about 2 months away from the holiday, and I got to order it. I got to figure out the system. So he said, oh, we met about it and we decided we're not going to allow it. And I was shocked, because I said, it doesn't make sense, because I needed to have been at that meeting to present a live example or something, because you don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about a sukkah. It's like, you're going to decide Judaism without having a Jewish person there. It's ridiculous. So I didn't like his answer. So I just went to his superior, which was the deputy director of that wing of the state system. And I called her She's a very good friend. Mrs. Ortiz is her name. And I spoke with her and I said, this is what's going on. Y'all had this meeting. It doesn't make sense. And she was mortified. She said, Rabbi, we didn't have another meeting. I said, you didn't have another meeting? But he said that, no, we did not have another meeting. And you know what? Thank you for letting me know, because I'll make sure that we have another meeting with the head, the executive director of the prison system. We'll meet together with you and you can demonstrate what needs to be done. So I remember I had to fly to New York. Another month later, my younger sister, she was engaged and it was her engagement. So I flew to New York. And while I'm in New York, I pick up what they call a pop-up sukkah. It's like a tent, and you snap it. It's made for people when they go on trips, that they can take it in the trunk of their car and have a portable sukkah wherever they go. I remember I flew back from New York, and then the next day we're having this meeting at a prison here in Sugar Land. And I remember I asked the lady, I said, do me a favor, please make sure that the chaplain is not there, because if I'm going to see him at the meeting, it's going to be very uncomfortable, probably for him and for sure for me, because he's a very dishonest person. So she said, okay, don't worry, Rabbi. Well, the next day comes and he's there. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So we did our walkthrough through the unit, talking about different things, because we were also starting to discuss enhancing Jewish practices at the units. And this particular inmate that had very much wanted the sukkah helped me build the sukkah for the executive director. We did it indoors in a chapel, just for the executive director to see what a sukkah is. So we built this. It was like a 4x6 sukkah. It wasn't a massive one. It fit like 4 people inside. And so I show it to him, and he thinks about it, and with the chaplain in the room, and he turns to me and he says, it's all right, yeah, we can have this. So he turned to the, I couldn't help but just like look over at the chaplain to see his reaction, but whatever. I didn't gloat too much, but I was like, okay, good. So he said, but the only thing is that I want you to replace the walls, that the walls should be see-through for security purposes. I said, that's not a problem. So I remember I went to the not grocery store, to the like one of these Ann's Linens, I remember it was, and I don't think it exists anymore. I got these plastic shower curtains and put it on like a shower curtain around the walls, and like help kind of like tie down, by sticking a tie around to hold it closer to the poles. So anyways, I set it up. Very good. Anyways, on my way out of the prison, the inmate wasn't there when the executive director said his word. And he asked me if we were successful. And I said, we were successful. There are some limitations, but we're going to have a sukkah this year. And so he was very, very happy about it. And so I went on my way, he went on his way. Unfortunately, a couple of days later, this was on a Wednesday, on Monday, I get a phone call from the inmate's mother saying, my son collapsed and he has been rushed to UTMB in Galveston. What had happened? He developed a rare form of leukemia called acute leukemia in just a couple of days. I saw him on Wednesday. On Saturday, his tongue started turning like green underneath. He went to the medical. They said, you're okay, go back. And then on Sunday afternoon, he just collapsed and he was like in very bad shape, and they had to transport him. And the sad end of the story is that he ends up passing away on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, this particular inmate. So it was a very, very sad thing. One of the most spiritual moments, though, I've had from the whole story was in the prison, was that Sukkot. I went to the prison and we put the sukkah up, and there were another 4 Jewish inmates in that group. And we sang and we held arms, like camp style, like Hine Matov Manayim. And we celebrated, and we all felt this particular departed inmate's soul. Like it was so tangible. And it was one of the most amazing experiences. And the other thing that I also learned about the story is that everybody has their unique, specific purpose of what their soul needs to accomplish in this world. And most times when you see a person has accomplished it, a lot of times they move on to the next world, whatever it is. So it was interesting to see, in my understanding, how this all this inmate wanted to do was to bring the spirituality of the sukkah into the dark place called the Texas State Prison System. And as soon as that, the highest people in the state approved it, from then on, momentarily later, he passes away, which to me was a very, very powerful lesson. Is it a happy lesson? No, it's not, but it's something that we learn from in our life.
It's one of those things that emphasizes that wonderful teaching. You're not expected to finish the task, but you're not exempt from beginning it.
That's right.
Beautiful. Yeah. Perhaps we, in the interest of time, perhaps we can move to something about the friendship circle with the
Sure,
Middle
not a problem at all. So in regards to the friendship circle, so for those of you who are not familiar with what the friendship circle is, so Friendship Circle is a Chabad-sponsored organization that every city has its own franchise of it. I mean, there's not every city, but I don't even know how many there are now in the world. When we started the Houston chapter at that point back in 2003, there was only about 6 or 7 in the whole world actually. And so we're from one of the earlier chapters. So the question is, what was the Rebbe's view on special needs communities? So it's kind of interesting when we got together, the Chabad Rabbis. So one of the things that turned me on to working with the special needs community was in 1999, I became involved as being the contract rabbi for the Richmond State School, which is now known as the Richmond State Supported Living Center, where those who are unfamiliar with what is a state school, it's not a school. It's a state-funded institution where people that are very severe, that have become, if you will, property of the state, live their lives. It's not a terrible place. Actually, it's very country-ish, very nice. There's one in Brenham that I've gone to. There's one in Richmond that I go to twice a month, even till today. Even when COVID was going on, I wasn't able to go, but we still did the services for them. And now I'm going back in person to Richmond. So because of my involvement, this was an entry point to being exposed to the Houston Jewish community of individuals who had children who had special needs, and it fit the description of Friendship Circle so well. So I went up with my wife, and at that point, Rabbi Traxler as well, to Detroit to learn about the Friendship Circle and to bring it home. So one of the things that was discussed at the Friendship Circle meeting was a letter that the Rebbe wrote, I believe it was in the late 1950s. And just to show you how far society has gone, unfortunately back then, there's a term that was used, which was mentally retarded. We don't use that term is not used anymore. But in the Rebbe's letter, a lot of those terms are brought up. But what was the point? The Rebbe was writing to a rabbi who had an opportunity to do Jewish programming for people that had severe special needs. And this person was conflicted because if you look at Torah law, traditional halachic Torah law, there are certain levels of people's handicap that will exempt them from doing commandments. And like the main crossing point is something called being what's called a bar das. What is a bar das? A bar das, simply put, this is what a senior rabbi told me, is if a person is wearing something holy like a pair of tefillin, he will know in his own mind that he has to take them off in order to go to the bathroom, or he knows that he needs to go to the bathroom, and he just doesn't go to the bathroom on himself wearing these holy things. That's a very clear definition in Jewish law of what a bar das is. So this rabbi was bemoaning, why do I have to waste my time in this home for the severely retarded, is what the rabbi is writing back then, and do Jewish programming for these clientele? So the Rebbe gave a very long answer. It's a very long letter, and I'm just going to summarize it, which the Rebbe's point is that the special needs or the handicap is only on an external level. But from an internal level, you should know that it's brought down in many Jewish sources and in Midrashim that the souls of the people that have special needs come from a much higher level. Why? And what's the proof behind it? Because why are we obligated to do commandments? So everybody goes into this whole thing. Why are we obligated to do commandments? We're obligated to do commandments because we need to refine our physical body in the physical realm with this spirituality in order that we refine ourselves and elevate ourselves, right? So if I'm exempt from doing those responsibilities, what does that mean? It means I'm not obligated to do them because I don't need that refinement. So the Rebbe was saying these unique individuals are very high souls that don't need the refinement of the day-to-day practice of Torah and mitzvot that you and me need. So does that mean that they shouldn't have any spirituality at all in their lives? No, you still need, they don't need the spirituality in order to do the mitzvah. They need the spirituality to perform an aura or an environment of comfort for their souls, because their souls are healthy, and the souls are looking for religious exposure, spiritual exposure. So therefore, go and on their level, tell them stories, play music for them, do activities to engage them so that their souls can have comfort from spirituality or from the Jewish religion. And that letter became the basis of the friendship circle. So what is the friendship circle? The friendship circle here I do in Houston. So it includes visiting the state supported living centers and other group homes and facilities, and then has teenagers from all over the Houston area that become big buddies and little buddies, or big brothers, little sisters, big sisters to children that have special needs. And they go to the homes of these children once a week, and they give the parents a little bit of respite time and connect with the children on a very, very strong level. And then there's a lot of social activities that take place, bowling and other holiday activities that are done. And either it's done separate from the community, or it's done with the community, but with a special track that they would be able to enjoy it and gain something from it as well. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you, a personal story from the friendship circle, this will be, I guess, my closing story, and then I guess I'll take questions, is I remember from the Richmond State School, there was one of the clients there, so the people that are there are very severe. And I remember before the first time I went there, the person who got me in, her name is Ms. Eileen Robinson, Aleha Shalom, she's passed on since then. And she told me, when she told me about it, I was very, as they say, wet behind the ears. I had no idea what to do for this. I know how to play piano, by the way. So I'm like, okay, I can play piano. So I can make olive oil with them. I know how to do that. So she's like, Rabbi, these people, you'll have to come once and see what it's like. But I would just tell the story and play piano. That would be good. So I remember walking in and not knowing what to expect. And it was like, I wouldn't say the word scary, but it was different. It was different from the norm. You know, you had people that were hitting themselves. One was wearing a helmet because they had this behavior of constantly hitting themselves in the head. You had people that were squealing and screaming, and it was a little bit scary because it's not what you're usually used to. But, you know, I thought to myself for a moment, how does the Rebbe see these people? And what does the Rebbe expect of me as his emissary in this position? Like, what am I supposed to be doing here right now? And so all of a sudden, I closed my eyes and I told myself, I'm not talking to these people, I'm talking to their souls. And that has been my guiding thought ever since then. So I remember after this little Hanukkah party, I sat down on the piano and I started playing a song, Hava Nagila. And one of the low functioning clients who was like just babbling and doesn't really communicate well, all of a sudden started clapping to the song Hava Nagila, and then she started singing Hava Nagila Hava, and the caretakers were like, she barely speaks English. We didn't know that she even knows any Hebrew. And then all of a sudden she yells out at me. And she calls me mama. Till today, she still calls me mama. Mama, I want a kanedel. Bring me some kanedelach, which is matzah balls. And I was like, insane. And till today, I mean, that chaplain is not in that school anymore, but he would always say it for years later. He said, you see, this is a proof. When you bring spirituality to them, they know, their souls know what's going on. And they can do things that they normally don't do. And it just fits so beautifully with the Rebbe's vision of dealing with clients that have severe special needs. So that's my spiel for today. That's my talk for today about the Rebbe and inclusion and bringing, working as a team to make this world a much better place. Everybody, I guess the take home from here is everybody has to kind of see themselves where they are in their lives, what talents they have, and figure out a way how to become partners for this global army of good. We're here to bring more light into the darkness. And as the Rebbe, and just to conclude, as the Rebbe would always say, the Torah, which is Torat Chaim and Torat Emet, which means it's a Torah of life and it's Torah of truth. So it says when God created this world, it was the garden. So that means that the essence of this world is a garden. And the Rebbe would then say, even though the world looks like a jungle at times, but we mustn't forget that it's truly God's garden, and we are placed in God's garden to guard it and to keep it. So everybody does it in their own path, but we are all creating unity because we recognize we're all doing this together and we're all in this together. So by doing this, let's transform the darkness of the world to an era of light with redemption. And I thank you very much. If there's any questions.
And we don't need to end exactly at 1 if you're able to stay for a few more minutes for questions. But one of the things that I think is really powerful about what you shared with us today is I think that, and incidentally, Roger Poser wanted to send you a personal message that I put in the chat. He had to leave the meeting early, but he was involved with Chabad before he moved up to Kingwood, I believe. I think there's a perception of those of Jewish people who've never experienced what Orthodox Judaism is, that there's a perception that Orthodox Judaism is strict and limiting. And to have these stories of the outreach to people who society likes to forget about, that mentally challenged people are people that are strange to us, or prison inmates have done something to deserve harsh treatment and are beyond being, beyond kindness. And to see that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a man who was devoted to, and even yourself, devoted to an Orthodox lifestyle, was also interested in the humanity of all. And so it's just really gratifying. It's one of the things that that I've learned through my connection. And in fact, when Rabbi Goldstein and I first started going to the prison together, one of the things that he mentioned to me was that he knew that there were some inmates who were who embraced his teachings, and there were other inmates who were a little bit wary of the Orthodox dogma. And that when we would go together, myself as a non-Orthodox teacher, rabbi, and that we showed the blend of what we call Kolal Yisrael, that the whole community of Israel. And so that if there was an inmate who didn't particularly connect with the Orthodox, Rabbi Goldstein had somebody else here who said, Dan's got another way of looking at it. And he was showing that he respected me. I was showing that I respected him, and that we were really partners in that respect. So, I'm wondering if there are people who have some specific questions for Rabbi Goldstein.
Nobody wrote me anything, but you can take yourselves off mute if you wanted to ask. but it's fine. I have a couple of minutes still if you want.
Could you briefly tell us about the Rebbe as far as where he was born and his age when he passed away? And I don't think he had children, if I recall. Just a little background on the person.
Sure. Here's a little bit of background from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was born in 1902 in a place called Dnepropetrovsk, which is in the Ukraine. And his father was the head rabbi of that city. And he lived through, I guess we all know, the wars, and ran away to America with his wife. He was married in Poland. He married his cousin, which is the daughter of the previous Rebbe, as Dan had mentioned, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. So one of the daughters was Chaya Mushka, that was her name. That's who my daughter's named after. And the Rebbe married that Rebbe's daughter, and they were cousins. And then the war kicked off. The Rebbe went to France. The Rebbe learned in the University of Berlin. He learned in the Sorbonne. The Rebbe was a brilliant engineer, helped design something to do with boats and a radar system. And when he came to America, he was employed at the Brooklyn Naval Yards. At the same time, the Rebbe was an extreme Talmud Chacham, well-versed in all aspects of the Torah, had a photographic memory. They say stories that when he was in France during the war era, and he was giving a Talmud class, there was one time that he was reading it a little bit slowly, and then at the end of the class, somebody went and they saw that it was the wrong book. But because he didn't want to show like that he knows it without a book, he took out a separate book and was reading it in his page as if he was reading it from the right book. The Rebbe was a very humble person, and actually, and he came to America in 1940 1941 with his wife. So this year is 80 years. We're celebrating from. Actually, it's in the next few days. On the 28th day of Sivan is the anniversary of 80 years since he came to America. So when he came to America, within 9 years, his father-in-law passed away. And it took about a year for the Rebbe to take on the leadership of the movement. The Rebbe was very humble, didn't want to do it at the beginning, and the Hasidim kept on pushing and pushing and pushing. And then ultimately, 1 year later, from the date that the previous Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe took on the leadership of the movement and continued to lead. And he passed away in 1994 at the age of 92. But if you speak to most Chabad Hasidim, will tell you, even though he's physically not present with us, but he's still spiritually our leader, and we still connect to him through his lessons and his teachings.
There's a great biography that was written by Joseph Telushkin, who is not a Chabad person, but a great teacher and a great author. And you can learn a lot about the Rebbe from Rabbi Telushkin's book. I had another thought that just slipped my mind. But learning about the Rebbe is, it's real to see that. Oh, here was the question. When you go to Israel, and this has a little bit of controversy to it. When you go to Israel, you see posters of the Rebbe's face with the word Mashiach underneath it. Because apparently there are some people who believe that Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson may have been the Messiah. What can you comment about that in terms of a theory, and who is Mashiach, and what does Messiah mean to Jewish people in general, and what does it mean to the Chabad Lubavitch movement?
So that's a very good question. It's a very long answer. I'm going to try to keep it focused and to the point. But first of all, we have to understand a few things. Number one, that according to the traditional Jewish belief, one of the 13 principles of faith is that we believe in the coming of Mashiach every day, and so every day has a potential. The person who authored the 13 principles of faith as well authored a book called the Mishnah Torah. Who is that person? That's Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. So he, in the book of the Mishnah Torah, he's the only code of Jewish law that has a section of laws called the laws of Mashiach, which the laws of Mashiach really define and tell you what the Jewish Mashiach is and what kind of characteristics do we have to look for in a Jewish Mashiach. You know, what's the purpose of the Jewish Mashiach and candidacy and so on and so forth. So all I can tell you, that's just as a basis. So what is Mashiach going to do? Mashiach is going to come, as Maimonides says, and he's going to bring the world to its originally intended purpose of creation, meaning he's going to elevate the world. It says that the Jewish people are not going to be, they will be a superpower, but their point of being in power will not be to rule over other people, but will be to learn Torah and do mitzvah undisturbed, not worrying about anti-Semitism, and there will be a transformation of the world. It will be a wonderful thing. There will not be a rapture. People are not going to go to heaven, and the evil people stay below. Like I've been talked to with a lot of non-Jewish people. The world is going to be revealed that it's truly a garden. Just the garden will come out, and we will see it. Mashiach's job will be to be the Jewish leader. Like in the olden days, there was a two-leader system. We had what was called the Nasi, which was like the head of the Sanhedrin, and we had what was called the Kohen Gadol, who was the high priest. So Moses was the Nasi, and Aaron was the high priest. Going down the generations of Jewish leadership, when there was a temple, that's how Judaism worked. So Mashiach is going to be the Nasi of the world. He's going to be the world leader, that his job will be to teach Torah and innovations in Torah and to lead the world into that era of the Messianic redemption. Now, what type of a person does this leader need to be? So Maimonides tells us that he has to have a few qualifications. Number one, he has to come from the house of David, meaning that comes from the tribe of Judah, from the father. It goes generation, and it goes straight to David, King David, David HaMelech. Number two, he's going to have to be well versed in the Torah as well. And number three, he's going to have to be religious. Like he's going to have to do the mitzvahs. Okay, and that says if we have a person that meets those qualifications, you could assume that this is what we call a messianic candidate. The term that Maimonides uses is becheskas shehu Mashiach. There's a potential that this person could be considered the Messiah. It says, but when is a person considered Messiah for sure? So Maimonides tells you when he brings the lost remnant of Jewish people to Israel, and people all are becoming observant, and he builds the holy temple in its place in Jerusalem and restores the older Judaism, then we know for sure that it's the for sure Messiah. So he goes into two things. There's what we call a Messiah candidate, then he goes into what we call a for sure Messiah. So that's just a lot of Jewish law. Now, the question is Chasidim's feelings about their Rebbes, and I'm saying Chasidim in general because it's not something that's unique to one Hasidic group or another. It's actually a statement in the Talmud, in the Tractate of Sanhedrin. It says, in the school of this rabbi, they say Mashiach's name is that. In the school of that rabbi, they say the name of Mashiach, the name Mashiach is that. In other words, every group felt that their leader, if he met those qualifications, was their Messiah. Now, when people say somebody is the Messiah in Judaism, they do not mean that this person is the established Messiah. It's impossible. You know why? Because we're not in Israel with the third holy temple, and the Messiah hasn't come. So it's not Messiah. What it is people feel that they have a candidate that they respect, and they have no problem if that candidate is Mashiach or not. One of the unfortunate problems that took place at the time of the Rebbe's passing was a lot of the followers took it upon themselves that one of the processes of the redemption is to define a realistic candidate and to tell the world about it so that the world understands that this could be the Messiah. So what they did is they start printing pictures of the Rebbe and they put the words Messiah and welcome the Messiah and so on and so forth. And what you need to know is that the Rebbe in his lifetime was against it 1,000%. He never said that's a great thing. There is no mitzvah of defining who the Messiah is. What is the obligation? The obligation is to be a good person and to learn Torah and do mitzvahs in order to bring Mashiach. That's the obligation. So like sometimes people ask me, but Rabbi Goldstein, what do you believe? What's your belief system? So I'm not apologetic. Some rabbis will say, well, that's personal. I don't like to discuss my personal life. Do I tell you that I love my wife, even though everyone knows it? But I don't go that way. I'll tell people that I don't mind saying it. In my heart, to me, the Rebbe is my Mashiach candidate. If it comes that somebody else is the Mashiach, I don't care. You know why? Because, as we say, whoever the Rebbe accepts as Mashiach will also accept as Mashiach, as the Hasidim. It's not, but what? Accepting in my heart that the Rebbe is my Mashiach candidate is one of my motivating factors because it gets me excited because I personally want to see the Rebbe again. I do. And the only way in Judaism that we're going to see people that have passed on, that they are revived in the traditional, in the Orthodox belief system is that when Mashiach will come, there'll be an era of what's called Tchias HaMesim, which means that the dead will be brought back to life, and then we'll be reunited with our dearly departed loved ones. So that's one of the things that motivate me, because I feel that the world, we need these leaders to come back. So
great clarification. Thank you so much. I never asked you that question in private. I asked it to you in public, put you on the spot, and I think you gave a beautiful answer, especially the idea that it's not a competition, that if we're hoping for a messianic age, we don't care who it is, that it's not an election. Yes. One of the teachings, and if sometime you'll help me find, because I heard it was from the Talmud, but I'm not sure where, a teaching that I learned long ago was that if we were to think of everyone as a Messiah candidate and in disguise and treat them that way, then how would our words and actions be so different that we might, if the Messiah is not revealed during our lifetime, it might not matter because we've created that kind of an age.
So just before we hang up, along those lines, an interesting thing, the last year the Rebbe spoke in 1992, before his stroke, at the last global convention of the Chabad Rabbis, the Shulchan convention. So he said a very interesting message, which was that the job for this generation and for us is to prepare the world to receive the face of Mashiach. It's a terminology. And so what does that mean? What does that look like? So as a student, because I was 17 years old, nobody really understood it. It was like, okay, so we have to prepare the world that Mashiach is going to come. The next year, I was a rabbinical student in Montreal in the yeshiva. And I remember being a Shabbat, we had these Shabbat parties, and the students of the school were the counselors, and we would go to homes of different grades and run like a Shabbat activity in people's houses. It's called Mesibat Shabbat, like what you do in camp, right? So, an overnight camps. So I remember my group was misbehaving terribly. One of my problems is because I have terrible classroom control, because I'm a nice guy and I want to be friends and buds with everybody. So to me, I don't put myself, I'm the rabbi and you're the kids, but we're all kids together. Let's have fun. That's my deal, unfortunately, whatever. Fortunately for me or unfortunately for other people. But anyhow, I remember the kids were misbehaving and I couldn't get them under control. And the house where this Shabbat party took place was a big Chabad rabbi in Montreal who was very intimidating to me at that time in life. And he walks into the room and he said, Kinderlach, which means children. The Rebbe said that we have to prepare ourselves in the whole world to receive Mashiach. Do you know what that means? And all of a sudden my ears turned on because I'm like, I've never really heard somebody expand. What does this mean? So he's like, you know what this means? It means that if Mashiach were to walk into this room right now, how would you feel about it? Are you going to run to receive him, or are you going to be embarrassed because of the way you're acting? So.
That's a great story. So thank you so much, Rabbi Goldstein. The Rabbi Goldstein does mitzvahs all the time, and he is not doing any kind of a fundraising appeal. This was a favor. This was a nice mitzvah for him to do. But if you should desire to support some of his activities, just Google Rabbi Red Sunshine Fund. And if you want more specific, I can get you, but that will explain the different good works that he does. We are appreciative of people who have contributed to our own virtual programming fund, which is bringing in different speakers, different musicians, different things for Shabbat services. Cantor Francine Davis Jacobs will be with us again on June 4th, Friday night, June 4th. We also have a wonderful presentation coming up in the middle of June. It's going to be an evening presentation called Jews in Space by Roger Weiss of NASA. And it's going to talk about dreidels and Torahs and Jewish astronauts that have gone into space. So we are delighted every Friday night at 7 o'clock. If you're not on our email list, just give us a note and get on the email list. And I'm going to turn off the recording now and thank Rabbi Goldstein one more time.
Thank you.
Yes, and I did have one request earlier in the chat room to see the painting that's behind me. So I'm just going to adjust my camera there. This painting was done by a woman named Katie Haberman, who we taught together at the I. Wiener Jewish Secondary School, a middle school, and she did this painting for me. She's not Jewish, but she was the science teacher at the school, and we became friends there. And she asked me to speak at her church a number of times, and she did both this painting and the painting that is in the hallway outside my office at Temple Beth Torah. So I had a special request to see that painting, so there it is. All right, my friends, I'm going to leave the room open for just another couple of minutes if people want to talk to each other. And thanks again, Rabbi Goldstein, for enhancing our understanding, and we hope to learn from you again.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Rabbi Goldstein,
Yes.
just out of interest, you have the same surname as the chief rabbi of South Africa, and my niece is married to his brother, but that doesn't help me. I just wanted to say thank you not only for your talk and the various insights, but also for all the good that you do. I wondered how you coped with your philosophy with patients who are either psychopaths or major personality disorders.
That's a good question. And actually, one of the things I do is I'm a rabbi on staff at the Menninger Clinic, which is those who don't know, is a very big mental health clinic, worldwide mental health clinic that's based here in Houston. It's the same philosophy as how to embrace people that have special needs. There are special needs that are physical, there are special needs that are mental, there are special needs that are emotional, you know? So to me, the thing is that we're always focused on the soul, which is healthy, and we try to love and help the person as much as we have. My message to my friends in the Menninger Clinic is always one about increasing what we call bitachon in Hashem, which means trusting in God. as much as we can under the circumstances as a way of comfort. And I always do two things with them, which is try to get them to say the Shema at night and to do a cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting. And then when they wake up in the morning, to say the statement of the Modeh Ani, that is a very empowering statement to get your day going, because we explain it like a meditation and a thought that I'm thankful to God, that you've returned my soul within me. And then the last words are Rabbi Menachem, your faithfulness is great. And I go and I teach, what does it mean that your faithfulness is great? Who's talking? It's us talking to God, telling God, your faithfulness is great in me. In other words, God, you believe in me because you let me come back to life this morning, because when I went to sleep, part of my soul went up to you. Now that I woke up in the morning, I'm totally restored. And the fact that you restored me is because you believe in me that I'm going to be able to fulfill my potential today. So I try to move them along. Is it always easy? It's not. Actually, some of y'all have seen that a few times I'm looking at my phone even while I'm here, because I have a lot of interesting people that drain me sometimes emotionally, and it's very common in the Japanese world, right, Rabbi? but at the end of the day, we try to get ourselves out of the way and just make it all soul to soul. That's the only
Well,
way.
it's good that rabbis can be friends with each other, so that we can lean on each other when we need to.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. May I just ask you, and I don't know if this is, and it's not related to your topic today, but we have a friend who converted to become a conservative Jew, very committed, very involved. And we had come out one evening or after Tikkun Leil Shavuot, and we're talking to a Chabad rabbi who'd just given a lecture. The rabbi would acknowledge me, but would not acknowledge the convert. And it wasn't that the convert hadn't tried greeting or asking him questions. It was as if he wasn't there. Is that rabbi's personal behavior, or is that what is expected from that rabbi?
So let me just tell you something interesting in rabbinics. Whenever I hear stories like this, it's always important to see what is the totality of the picture. I don't know if that conservative person knows that rabbi, if they might have had a falling out, or if they are just he's not comfortable with that person as a person. Not every rabbi is an individual, and every individual has their own personality. I have no problem speaking to anybody. Jewish, not Jewish, convert, not convert, prisoner, not prisoner. But that's my personality. I'm a people person, and I'm able to connect to people's souls. That's who I am. If this rabbi wasn't able to do it, that's his, unfortunately, that's his personal personality thing.
Thank you.
And each rabbi also has, like there might have been a thing about whether he was counting him in the minyan or different things, but every case is individual. And, myself or Rabbi Goldstein or anybody, can't judge somebody else in terms of those kinds of things, because every situation is different. But there are different levels and different standards. And, I've known some people who were Jewish by birth from my standards, but wanted a different kind of conversion. If you want to get a smile, Herb, watch the video of a man named Yisrael Campbell, and it's called Circumcise Me. I think you can find it on YouTube. And it was a man who converted 3 times. Hey, have you seen it, Rabbi Goldstein?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he converted 3 times because he was non-Jewish. He embraced Reform Judaism. Then he wanted to keep kosher, and the conservative rabbi said, you have to convert again. And then he decided to make Aliyah, move to Israel, and become more observant, maybe even Hasidic. And he converted again, and he gives a very, very funny rendition. So anyhow, if there's no other comments, I'm going to close the meeting. And once again, thanks to everybody who came, because none of these would be very interesting if it weren't for all the participants. See you on Shabbat.
All right, guys. Shalom.
Shalom.
Rabbi, I couldn't see the picture. Could I
Oh.
trouble you?
Sure. There it is.
Wonderful.
Yeah, this is my wife's office. My office is being painted, and she likes the painting better than I do. So we let it hang in here.
What drasha were you giving when they did the painting?
So I had done. I had actually led a Passover Seder for my friend's Unitarian church, and after the Seder, she just wanted me to pose, take a photograph, and she did the painting for the photograph.
One day I will tell you about my uncle and his portrait, but not here.
All right.
Thank you.
I look forward to it.
Thank
All right.
you.
And so Jay, who's Jay? Are you Jay Hamburger? I don't know who Jay is.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, it's Jay Hamburger.
That's what I figured. Welcome, Jay. Glad you could come.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this immensely. I was at Kenny and Ziggy's. I listened while I was eating, and now I'm driving home and I'm finishing up with you. So
Nice. Drive
it's been a
safe.
pleasure, an enlightened pleasure.
Excellent. Drive safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.